So you want to write a story about a culture that's not your own, and you don't want it to sound like,
I like nachos, I like tacos, everything with some salsa. My mom was killed by the drug war, and I'm so sad, but I have my nachos.
then make sure to stay for this video because I'm going to be discussing all about writing a story with a character that's not your own culture. If this is your first time here, which is most likely because no one really follows me. Hi everyone, my name is Benjamin, this is Oatmeal Quest, and we're going to be discussing all about stories because I myself am an upcoming filmmaker and I have a thing or two to say about this topic. My background actually is in cultural anthropology, which is all about culture, society, and honestly just what happens to groups of people today. I also happen to have a Venn diagram exactly of filmmaking and an interest in culture because my favorite type of filmmaking is the one that represents culture in the best ways possible. And that's not because I just really want people to be respected, which is, by the way, a really big part of it, but rather to see a different perspective. I think stories have the power to transmit messages that we otherwise wouldn't be able to experience because who we are really limits what we can experience as a person. And so stories, when they explore culture in the right way, it can be amazing and actually super fun. It's not always about learning actually, it's about just like watching or reading an enjoyable story. And one of the things that you're actually supposed to learn when you're writing is to write what you know. But what happens when you don't actually know much about what you're writing? Well, it depends. When it comes to culture, there's something that you need to do before you start getting an interest on doing this. I need you to ask yourself, why? Why do you want to make a story about a character that's from a different culture than yours and not something that you already know? Is it because it's fun and you want to like get to know a different perspective on matters? Is it because you know people from this culture? Or is it just because you actually just think they're really fucking cool and like honestly, like why wouldn't you want to write a kung fu movie because Bruce Lee is amazing? Now you might think I might have a strong opinion about this, like what interest is good or not. And I actually don't think that. I think you can have any interest whatsoever. Wanting to make a character from a different culture than yours just because it's cool can be a perfectly valid reason. But I think what distinguishes the reason why you actually want to make a character from a different culture is to ask yourself, is it worth it? Because accurately representing a character is not only a matter of respect, but a matter of the story being any good whatsoever. As you saw in this thumbnail of this video, Emilia Perez, the Oscar contending movie, is being trashed by most Mexican viewers because of its awful representation, but not only by Mexican viewers, but rather by people who have any association with this culture whatsoever. Because bad representation in this case, it's making it less enjoyable and it's making it resonate less with the story. If you want to make a story about a different culture, it's really important that you get it right, not only because of the respect that we owe to these people, but because otherwise most likely there will be flaws within your story. So taking this into consideration, is your interest in the matter so big that it will carry you through the process of getting this right? Or is it just more like a thing that you think it's kind of cool, but honestly it's not worth committing the effort? Because this is what I think is really cool about this. If you actually have a genuine interest to represent the culture well, most likely it will not feel like a chore to do research. It will feel like something inevitable and that you really want to do. To know the differences in language, to know how different experiences might happen to people, to know how architecture changes or the music or the culture that they themselves make and not the art production that is made about them. All of these things should be really fun for you. Otherwise, you're just gonna learn the most basic surface thing about a culture and you're not going to be able to represent it in the best ways. So yes, you kind of have an initial superficial interest, but it's very likely that it will not be strong enough for you to do your job well. And if that's the case, most likely your story will suffer because of it. Would it make any sense whatsoever if Yoda from Star Wars just starts rapping like Hamilton at some point? Like maybe in an SNL skit, but not in the Star Wars universe, because we all know how Yoda works, right? His different mannerisms and his different ways. It would make the experience unwatchable, even if the rap is good, you know? Now that we defined our interest to actually write this story, the process is actually super fun, in my opinion. Now, what I recommend the most, please, like if there's any way for you to do this, please just talk with someone from this community. Not only because you will be making a friend, but rather because it really helps to have someone being like, hey, no, actually, I would never do that. I myself am writing a web series about being a migrant in Western Europe. And for that, I knew I didn't want it to be about Latin Americans in Western Europe, but I knew that I wanted to make about the migrant experience in Western Europe, which meant that I needed people from different communities to represent these different characters. One of my favorite characters, one of the main characters, is Lin, a Chinese character. The reason why I wanted her to be Chinese is because I have seen a lot of Chinese communities here, especially in Belgium, and I think they honestly have a different experience from the one I'm having, and it would be super interesting to portray. However, I myself, besides living in Hong Kong for 6 months, which is not even China, I don't know much about Chinese culture. So of course I can try to take a wing at it, I can read some history or something, and I can base my experience that I've had with Chinese students that I've seen. But honestly, I don't know much, which was great when I actually found someone from China that could see this script and she was like, oh yes, actually you're writing it spot on, or like, oh, actually I would do that exact same thing. Because what we also need to understand is that culture is not a monolith. Culture allows different things, right? Someone from Mexico might be jolly and like to play the guitar and wear a sombrero, but there's a very high chance that there's also someone like that who's like very shy, who has never played any arts whatsoever and is actually into finance, just as that would make sense in Europe or in Africa or Asia. People will be different than their culture, but they will also have some things in common and they will have an opinion about their, which is why having different individuals from a country to tell you like, hey, actually what you're writing is great, or actually you could do this different, is of enormous improvement. Even if you're doing it wrong and they provide you with like, hey, actually we would do this in a different way, you shouldn't really see that as a restriction on your creative mastermind, but actually as an encouragement, like, okay, now I have this other rule that I need to follow. When you have a lot of restrictions when writing, it actually works out really well because your creativity can flow with the restrictions and not against them. But let's say you live in Valdivia in Chile and you have maybe not the best access for it, Chinese person. Well, the next step is this amazing thing which you might not have heard of, but it's the internet. The internet is amazing, guys. Like, you can really just do so many things here, and with it you can actually go into communities by this different group of people. It could be because I'm an anthropologist, but I really appreciate so much participant observation, which is to join a community and try to not only observe what they're doing, but try to participate in the way they're doing it. Always, of course, trying to respect it and for you to be a genuine member of the community to a degree. I understand that if you join like r/Asians maybe or something, I don't know if that exists even, like maybe you shouldn't actually try to be Asian, but rather to engage in Asian topics and ask them questions on what they think or what you think about things that happen to them. People are always super open to talk about where they come from, because if you want it or not, it's such a big part of us. Another way you can actually do this is by reading, watching, listening, anything that's made by the actual country. I think outside of the big industries of culture production, like Hollywood, let's say, there are very distinct styles that different countries have. For instance, if you go to a theater play in Chile, it's gonna be very likely like this abstract thing that, you know, has to like a lot of meaning and stuff. And if you go in a play in Argentina, it's very likely that you're gonna have like a much more day in a life kind of story. And it's not better or worse, it's just different, and it shows what the people who go to see these things actually have an interest on. The same if you're writing a book. What is this country producing? And what can I learn more about by just observing this? If all of these things sounds like too much trouble and it really is fundamentally changing the story in a way that you really don't want, that might be a reason for you to consider, hey, actually, maybe I shouldn't write about this culture. The whole thing that's happening with Emilia Perez right now is that it really seems like the director doesn't have an ounce of respect for this community and just had this fetishized version of what Mexico and its people mean and just decided to go with it. If you want to write about a culture that's different than yours, it really should come from a place of admiration and fascination of trying to understand what they feel like, and not what I feel like when I watch stuff that's made about them. So if this sounds like something you would like to try and do, by all means, go for it. As I said, I am doing it in my web series, and it's been so much fun because a lot of it really isn't research. It's just like having normal human interactions. I'm becoming really good friends with one of the actresses from my main characters, and I just met her mom. It was so interesting, but it was also so much fun to know where my friend came from. And I'm not meeting up with her to do research for my web series. I'm meeting with her because she's really cool and I just want to have a friend. So if you're writing about a different culture, that's how it should feel like. It really shouldn't feel like homework. So if you like this or you're interested in my project by any chance, please subscribe, give a like to this video, and let me know what you think. What are your projects that you're working on? Have you found anything that you think is particularly interesting or challenging? Honestly, if you have any questions, I am so down to respond. But at the end of the day, you can always just tell me to bugger off and get 13 nominations for an Oscar, right?